If the Phoenix Suns disaster is the death of the super team, that's bad news for the Utah Jazz. It's next on Locked on Jazz. Bum 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 bum.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
How are you? I am David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. On today's edition of Locked On Jazz, we will talk about the Phoenix Suns' unmitigated disaster and death of a super team again. But it's bad news for the Utah Jazz. We traded Rudy Gobert to the Minnesota Timberwolves in the greatest fleece of all time. Oh, maybe not. Maybe it wasn't the greatest fleece of all time. Maybe it was a great trade for both teams. And we traded Donovan Mitchell to Cleveland, and we got maybe everything. Disaster in Cleveland may be around the corner as well Tuesday night. How do the Jazz look after both those two trades? And what do those draft picks suddenly look like for the Utah Jazz? Long ways down the road, but worth taking a look at today as well here on Locked On Jazz. I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider, and this is Locked On Jazz. It's your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Thanks so much for tuning in to Locked On Jazz and making it your first listen of the day. And thank you to the everydayers who make Locked On Jazz what it is. We are free and available on all podcasting apps and on YouTube. Thank you. Thumbs up, follow, 5 stars, likes, super appreciated. They actually matter. Silly world we live in, but I appreciate it. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. Did you play this weekend? Did you jump on this weekend? I have to admit it. I have that competitive side, and I'm a big fan of Monopoly Go. The mobile hit twist on the classic Monopoly, so join your friends and download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play. All right. Friday's episode, I have just no idea what happened. Did not get up onto Spotify. I am as proud. I like it a lot. Like I've sent it to people that matter about Friday's episode. And so if you get a chance to go back and listen to it, I went through on Friday. I went through the last 13 years of NBA drafts and broke down, what I basically judged every player and looked at what actually every draft pick gives you. Tomorrow on the show, I'm going to look at GMs. So who do you want to know about? And what have they, Danny Ainge, obviously, Dennis Lindsay, obviously, Sam Presti's supposed to be the master. What have GMs done picking compared to expected value? So send me a note on X or email me at dlock09@gmail.com about who you want to see. But we've gone through and we have the expected value of every pick in the draft. We'll use it here today because we'll look at the Donovan Mitchell and the Rudy Gobert trade. All right, so Phoenix might be a disaster. They have Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, to Devin Booker, and they get swept pretty dramatically in the first round of the playoffs. All indications, and I heard this during the years, that Frank Vogel's going to be out. They really have not much else they can do other than pay off Frank Vogel. And so is this once again the death of the super team? And if you start to go through the history of it, you could tell me that the Lakers, Anthony Davis, LeBron James super team turned out to win a title. Okay. And I'm not even sure I think that's a super team. Here's what's interesting about this. The only super team that's really ever worked is the Heatles. Otherwise, every single time everyone tries to put together this collection of superstars onto one team and have it work, whether it was the Rockets with Harden in its various collections, Philadelphia with Harden and Embiid, Chris Paul in various collections, hasn't worked. The Warriors worked before Kevin Durant got there. And we could get into a pretty interesting debate on whether or not the Lakers actually count, even with a championship, necessarily on the Anthony, and it's not really a super team, frankly, it's just two really good team players together on the Anthony Davis LeBron era, because they do win a title, but they're also going to have they're going to end up, if they lose this year, they end up not getting out of the first round in 3 of the last 4 years. not making the playoffs one year, losing in the first round one year under Frank Vogel, winning the title, and then missing out on this year. Now, frankly, that was a franchise that had not seen the playoffs in 7 years. We forget about the Lakers. So maybe it was, and obviously getting LeBron's worth it. But it's an interesting question now on whether teams are going to do this anymore, because it just might not be worth it. And the way Phoenix has done it, they literally are hamstrung. They have the 22nd pick in this year's draft. They do not control their next draft pick till 2031. They have swaps in there, and they have 1 second-round pick in 2028, excuse me. Here's what they've really done, and this is where the super team's going to die. Because they have $184 million under 5 players, and they're $5.5 million under the second apron, and they've got to refill a team. They're going to be under the second apron, over the second apron. That means they cannot aggregate salaries anymore in trade. So they can't trade 10 million plus 20 million equals 30 million. They can't do that. They can't do 2 plus 1 equals 3. They have to just trade 2 for 2. They also cannot take back more salary than they trade for. So they can't do 2.1 equals 2. They can't do 21 for 20. They have no mid-level exception they can sign a player to. And they can only sign their draft picks and minimum salaries. So they're in a lot of trouble. However, I think this is bad for the Jazz. Building super teams, building up this talent, putting yourself in this position, I think it's bad. I think it's a bad decision. Like, it's the risk. A new owner came in, understand why they made the moves. I thought they were going to win the West. I'm not going to lie to you. I thought the offense was going to be so good. Didn't work. The risk is so dramatic. But for the Utah Jazz, who can never play that game, we need other teams to play that game and, frankly, fail at it for us to ever rise up into the ether of success. When someone like Phoenix has what feels like could be just a tremendous mess. Now, this all changes if they suddenly win in the playoffs next year, but when you start to consider that Kevin Durant is 13 and 18 in the playoffs since he left the Warriors, maybe Kevin Durant's not the answer. And Bradley Beal's last 3 possessions, I'll have a hard time getting out of my head. 2 turnovers and a stupid foul with the game on the line. Wow. And Devin Booker is pretty great. His playoff track record is kind of average. I mean, they got to the NBA Finals. We also could nitpick the heck out of that if we wanted to that year about the amount of injured teams they got through, but let's give them credit. They got to the NBA Finals. He deserves that. But if Phoenix really becomes the death of the super team, that in this day and age, with this collective bargaining agreement, with these restrictions, other teams look and say, oh, we can't do that. Considering the fact that super teams don't work, it's bad for the Utah Jazz. It's great to say, hey, they go build their super teams I go try to build it. We're seeing that other models work better. The Knicks are pretty good. Since OG Anunoby came, they're 20-3 when he plays. That's not a super team. That's a team that's just been constructed. Denver's pretty damn good. They've won a world championship. That's not a super team. That was a team that was just constructed. Minnesota's pretty great. That's a team that was just constructed. A bunch of number 1 picks, but just constructed. Oklahoma City's pretty great. That's not a super team. That's just a team that was constructed. If everyone's constructing teams in the same way, that's bad for us. We need teams to go try to do what Phoenix is doing and fail at it miserably and take a team off and take some of those styles and be in financial trouble and all those things. And if this is the death super team and teams are no longer willing to do it, and the new collective bargaining agreement literally leaves you like tied up in the back, I don't know. The analogy I'm using feels wrong, so I'm going to stop. Like, it's not good. What's about to happen to Phoenix may be enough to scare off every other team from ever doing this. That's not great. Is it possible that the Donovan Mitchell trade is the real heist and not the Rudy Gobert trade? It's next on Locked On Jazz. Today's show is brought to you by my friends over at Murdoch Chevy, located at Woods Cross, also located in Logan. Have you driven the Chevy Silverado truck? Because it's truck month right now at Chevy in the 2024 Silverado 1500 Crew Cab is amazing. 2.9% for 6 years. First payment or $1,000 down instead. Payment assistant. It is truck season. The 2024 Silverado gives you up to $5,000 of value back right now. You can get a trade-in allowance and a cash allowance. Plus, it's 2.9 for 72 months. It's amazing to see what's taking place in truck season right now at Murdoch Chevy, plus the Colorado. But I got to drive the Silverado probably about 2 years ago and still love it. Miss it every time. Trying to figure out how I can get to drive that Silverado again. Super great. Over at Murdoch Chevy, stop by. If you're going to stop by, you can email me first at dlock09@gmail.com. We'll set you up with that VIP meeting over at Murdoch Chevy. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at Monopoly Go. Did you get into it this weekend? Did you play a little Monopoly Go? If you haven't started already, Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for time tournaments where you work together to build on each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get going. Unique stickers you can trade with friends to compete for albums, cool new playing pieces to travel boards, hilarious emojis that are out there as well. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure, robot Pinko machine. There's always new timed machine events that help you win big, like massive multipliers. It's just super, super fun. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench, get in the game, and go download it now, free on Google Play or the App Store. Monopoly Go, game on. The Utah Jazz traded Rudy Gobert to the Minnesota Timberwolves for 5 first-round draft picks. And the current first-round pick, Walker Kessler. And the Jazz were like absolutely on their way because this was the greatest heist in the history of the NBA. The Jazz had Malik Beasley, Patrick Beverley, Leandro Balmaro, Walker Kessler, Jared Vanderbilt, and the 2023, 2025, 2027, 2029 first round pick, plus Walker Kessler. So 5 first round picks plus a 2026 pick swap. And then Anthony Edwards became one of the 5 best players in the NBA, along with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, all of who are in the Western Conference. And Rudy Gobert is great. So who wins this trade? Both. Both teams win this trade. I don't think you can really look at this trade anymore from the Utah Jazz, though, and necessarily think that this trade is going to yield you the massive, NBA superstar pick. That was kind of the hope in my book on this trade the whole time. My vision of the Jazz rebuild, which has been different than what I envisioned, was the Jazz were going to really be terrible and tank for 2023, 2024, 2025, and then start to work your way back up in 2026 with 3 or 4 pieces of the puzzle. And then when we made the trades, then 2027, 2028, and 2029, you're ascending and you sneak in with these great draft picks from Minnesota and Cleveland. That's always how I thought this was going to take place. Now, it turned out that the Jazz players they still had on their roster in 2023 were just way better than any of us expected. Mike Conley, Lauri Markkanen, it makes sense now. You look back at they're all pretty good. And they ended up winning a lot more games. And then they ended up with the 9th pick in Taylor Hendricks. And then last year they again exceeded and they ended up with the 8th. They're going to end up probably with the 9th pick again. And so we haven't done anything to be that terrible. And we haven't gotten that 1, 2, or 3, but we're still have a chance to build it. And I still think there's a real chance that my model, which is that we're going to be ascending in 26, 27 and suddenly get these picks is great. Minnesota's got a major financial crunch that winning a playoff series does not ignore. Okay, so let's make sure that that's true. And Karl Anthony Towns salary of 49 next year, 53 and 25, 26, and 26, 27 is still likely going to be something they have to strongly consider moving. But if for some reason they were to upend the Denver Nuggets in the second round of the playoffs, that'd be hard. Anthony Edwards, however, is signed through 2029. So unless Anthony Edwards demands out of his contract with a year or two left, and probably Minnesota doesn't do anything about it until a year left on his contract, they're going to be really good. Jaden McDaniels is signed. Oh, actually, that's just the estimate on the extension. But there's no way that Anthony Edwards is turning down the extension that he's going to get. Unless he's already signed it. Now I have to look at this. It's in a different color. But no, I think Anthony Edwards basically signed. The way it works, Anthony Edwards is basically signed until 2029. Which means that the draft picks that I had expected, where Minnesota has fallen apart, they're in a crappy city, it's cold as hell, nobody wants to move there, and the Utah Jazz are suddenly garnering the great picks in the draft from Minnesota, and my biggest concern was that the 2029 pick has protection on it, and that we might not get our 1 through 4 pick that year because Minnesota will be that bad, but they'll be protected. Well, that seems unlikely now. It now looks to me, quite honestly, using our draft chart that we built the other day, that I think it's fair to say that the Jazz next year's 2025 pick for the Minnesota Timberwolves will likely be a pick between 20 and 30. And that yields on average a borderline rotation, 50-50 chance of getting a rotation player. 20 through 21 in our draft, if looking from the years 2010 back, if you're drafting 20 through 21, there have been a grand total of 8 players in the last 13 years in the last 10 picks of the draft that have become a top 50 player in the NBA. So you have about a 7% chance of getting a top 50 player in the NBA in the bottom 10 picks of the draft. You have, it looks kind of on average on a given year that in those picks, you probably have in the bottom third, on average, 2 or 3 starters. 2 is probably the average. You have about a 20% chance of getting a regular starter. Maybe 3, maybe 30%. So the Rudy Gobert trade, if we look at it now, the 2023 first round pick that we get this year will be in that realm. The 2025 first round pick sure feels like, or we showing 23 pick we got last year. Excuse me, that was Keontae. The 2025 pick sure feels like a bottom 10 pick of a draft. The 2027 pick, pending, they are going to need a point guard. There's some things. That one could be a little bit more in the middle of the realm. And 2029 is still the wild card question mark with some protections out there. But it now feels as though if you have a 50% chance of getting a rotation player on that pick, on those picks, that we probably are getting 2, maybe 3 rotation players, including Walker Kessler, for Rudy Gobert, with still a possibility of an upside. Okay? And we took the Malik Beasley, Patrick Beverley, Jared Vanderbilt pieces along with Mike Conley and got ourselves the Lakers pick, which could be really good. Okay? I mean, this is the game you're playing. Suddenly that trade, which I very much thought was going to be the major pieces to the future of our rebuild with the rise of Anthony Edwards and the incredible play that he has, is now feels as though that's going to be a trade that yields pieces. Not the man, but pieces. The Donovan Mitchell trade, on the other hand, that one might be where the dividends really come in. We'll touch on that as we continue here on Locked On Jazz. Today's show is brought to you in part by Nissan. Nissan's got 3 different rides for you that are all pretty fabulous. The 2024 Nissan Rogue is perfect for cities, drives, and great escapes. It's a class exclusive Google built-in, is always updating assistant to call on almost anything. The 2024 Rogue is the perfect mid-side crossover for your next adventure. And then there's the Armada. Will change what you expect from a full-size SUV. Picture a rugged 4x4 that can seat up to 8 in first-class luxury and style. Tow bigger and explore further in the 2024 Armada. Are you the kind of driver that's looking to push things a little further? Even wonder what adventure could be around the corner? Well, our friends at Nissan have that lineup for you and capabilities to take you to the next level. The Nissan Pathfinder, the Nissan Armada, and the Nissan Rogue. Take the Rogue, the Pathfinder, and the Armada and go find your next big adventure and shop NissanUSA.com. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at DoorDash. DoorDash with all sorts of great, I'll tell you what, a bunch of the guys on the road live off DoorDash. We stay in these fancy hotels and you're Ubering everywhere, or you're paying for Ron Boone's $27 oatmeal. And these guys live by the DoorDash. And right now they're jealous that we're not in the playoffs because you can get 50% off your next order and up to $15 when you spend $15 plus on your next flour, convenient grocery store, or detail. Wait a sec, flour, Mother's Day, DoorDash. Yes, that's right. You could save yourself from this a little bit. When mom needs to smile, start Mother's Day with flowers or surprise her with gifts brand new she loves, delivered very same day with DoorDash. Moms are a gift, so give your gift the best gift. Get gifts as thoughtful as she is with DoorDash. Select hundreds of expertly crafted bouquets to the best of the tech self-care essentials delivered right to her door. Does mom have a sweet tooth? Is she a tech enthusiast? Is she a beauty connoisseur? Pair flowers with a gift card. Get thoughtful gifts she deserves with convenience you need. Choose same-day delivery or schedule a week ahead for when flowers and gifts should arrive at her door. Shop with the savings. Be proud. Door Pass membership. You'll save with that, by the way. $0 delivery and reduced service fees on eligible orders from Door Pass merchants that meet the minimum subtotal. Other fees apply. Terms apply. So here's the deal. Get all your Mother's Day gifts all in one place. Get 50% off your next order. $15 when you spend $15 or more next, but you need to use the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA. Order using DoorDash today. Terms apply. Get Mother's Day gift as unique as she is with DoorDash. Code LOCKEDONNBA. 50% off your next order, up to $15 when you spend $15 on your next flour, convenience, grocery, or retail now at DoorDash. Locked on NBA. Order today. DoorDash, terms do apply. Thanks so much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. We have all sorts of exciting things going on, but right now you need to make sure you make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed to you every day to bring your biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or free Amazon Fire TV channels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. I have not flipped mine on today. It's usually the first thing I do. But our draft coverage was just amazing, so I think tonight will be a lot. Today will be probably a heavy mix. I haven't seen the news come across. I usually get a little release word from our guys of what we have coming. Our men and women, not just our guys. Allie does incredible work on that, as well as Reed, who are the primary people who are giving that. Amazon Fire is super fun. If you haven't, I'm all into my Amazon Fire. Locked On Sports Today. You can grab it and just watch live and see what we have up. All right. Let's go back and look at the Donovan Mitchell trade all of a sudden, because Donovan Mitchell is now 3-6 in playoff games. He's really played 2 good playoff games since he went to Cleveland. Game 1 last year against the Knicks, he was amazing. Game 1 against Orlando this year, he was terrific. Otherwise, he has not been very good in the playoffs. He is not making 3-point shots in the playoffs. He is suddenly JB Bickerstaff is on the ropes, and we're suddenly beginning to see where this might be going a little bit. What's crazy here is the Jazz got Colin Sexton, Lauri Markkanen, and Ochai Agbaji on that deal. Ochai Agbaji is now a first-round pick in this year's draft. Plus, they have Cleveland's 2025 first-round pick. Well, that's suddenly looking really interesting when Donovan demands a trade this offseason. They'll still have Darius Garland, who's really good. They'll still have Evan Mobley, who's really good. And they'll still seemingly have Jarrett Allen, who's really good. So they're not, in fact, I might rather have, if you're talking about these teams, I might rather be Cleveland's future than Phoenix's future or some of these other things right now. Certainly. And Garland is signed through the 2028 season. Jarrett Allen is an unrestricted free agent in 2026. And I assume, well, he's just unrestricted. So it'll be interesting to see. And he's extension eligible, but at $20 million, I don't think he takes that extension. And Evan Mobley is mass extension eligible, and he'll be a restricted free agent, and they're gonna max him out. And then Donovan is a free agent next year at the end of the year at 35, and he'll bypass his extension from all indications. So they're still going to be, they're not going to be necessarily terrible, but they're not going to be, they're Darius Garland, Evan Mobley, and Jarrett Allen, and they're pretty hamstrung at that point. So this gets really interesting. Like the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Jazz got Colin Sexton and Lauri Markkanen, who are showing their value. Ochai Agbaji, who's this year's first-round pick. So that's a value of 1.1 that we talked about on our trade. Hey, the bottom of the first-round pick, your chances are 50% that you're getting a rotation player. The average is you're getting a borderline player. You're probably getting Ochai again. That's a chance. 2025 first-round pick, if Donovan's been traded, that could, if you cross over into the top 15, that's a good pick. 2026 trade or swap, who knows who's better in 2026? 2027 first-round pick, well, that gets interesting. Did Jarrett Allen leave in free agency? Cleveland won't be able to re-sign free agents? Darius Garland's pumping at 40? Are Garland and Mobley good enough to hold them together? They don't have any other draft picks that they're really going to be able to use to rebuild and get better? Free agents are unlikely to sign there? 2028 pick swap? I think there's a good chance we're suddenly swapping. I think there's very limited chance we're swapping with Minnesota in any of our swaps. And 2029 first-round pick, oh my goodness. When the trades were made, it was the Rudy Gobert trade that was the fleece. Because clearly Donovan's so much better than Rudy, which we could probably discuss on tomorrow's show. And because the Jazz got basically 5 first-round draft picks out of that, when you counted Walker Kessler, you got the 4+. And now all of a sudden, it starts to look like the Donovan Mitchell Cleveland Cavalier trade could really be the one that brings the dividends. And frankly, Tuesday night, you should be wearing an Orlando Magic shirt. I mean, really, from a Utah Jazz franchise standpoint, Tuesday night, Orlando Magic, Cleveland Cavaliers might be one of the most important basketball games that we have in our rebuild. If Orlando throttles Cleveland again and Donovan has another bad night, it devalues Donovan's trade value. It makes his situation in Cleveland less good. And it makes it more likely that he basically says, I'm not re-signing, and they have to trade him. And it means they probably get less for him. I mean, really, let's pile on. There's this game Tuesday night, Orlando Magic, Utah Jazz, we love Franz Wagner. But this game Tuesday night in Cleveland might have as big an impact on our rebuild as you can have. Because when Donovan Mitchell puts up yet another stinker and his trade value decreases and Cleveland's frustration increases and his enjoyment of being in Cleveland decreases and he suddenly wants out and they don't get as much for him because of his back-to-back playoff performances where he, for whatever weird reason, one of the best shooters in the entire NBA cannot make a 3 in the playoffs right now. Like, it's weird because this dude is a pure bona fide shooter, as good as it gets. But last year against New York in the playoffs, he was 13 of 45 from 3. In his last playoff series for us against Dallas, he was 10 of 48 for 3. And so far right now, he's 7 of 23 for 3. I'm telling you, go back to his draft workout. I thought didn't think he was going to be 30-point a game, Donovan Mitchell. I thought he was going to be Klay Thompson. This dude is